Welcome to another episode of Harbor Rock Wealth Management's podcast series, Life, Health, and Wealth, where we discuss topics that you need to hear about. A little different intro there. And for a reason, we are back in the studio.
It's been a while.
We've taken a little break and, we took some trips and rested the vocal cords a little bit, didn't rest the face. So if I look a little tired, we're coming off having COVID, as you all probably got the email. We are alive and well. The office is back humming. Feels good to be back. We did take the appropriate time to step away, and luckily we have a kind of business that functions when we work out of the home office still. So we really appreciate all the well wishes, patience, flexibility, et cetera, and we didn't really skip a beat. So it does feel good to be back, get some normalcy. We're back in the little brick studio here at Harbor Rock Studios, and we have a great guest back. You'll recognize Jake Jerome, our wellness docent, tour guide. I try to come up with new ones every time, but we're glad to have you back. It's good to see you, and we're going to continue our tour of the dimensions of wellness today, and we're going to hit on one that relates to everybody. Because regardless of your gender or your age or et cetera, everyone is a human being. And today we are talking about physical wellness, and we might touch on something else, but for the sake of time in a show, we could talk about this one for hours. So we are going to be talking about physical dimension of wellness today. And I mean, that goes on so many different levels. The first thing that I think of when I hear that is lifting weights, going for a run, a 10K, and the next thing I think of is intimidation. Where do people start? Do I have to join a gym? So I think you're going to kind of help us unpack some of that today.
Absolutely.
Welcome back, Jake.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to take the floor for a minute.
Yeah,
please.
And for, viewers, family members, and people watching, you guys are gems. And I absolutely appreciate you guys and what you're doing. I think you operate from a place of love. You care about your clients. You care about people. And this has been a fun project to be a part of. So thank you.
Yeah.
But the value that you're bringing to your clients and to other people who get a chance to watch these, it's phenomenal. I enjoy watching those nights when I'm laying in bed or can't sleep, even though I shouldn't be getting the blue light with the phone, or we'll put them on in the house. You're doing a great job, and really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. We
Cool.
appreciate you, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've definitely been an integral part of this ride as well with us. So it's been fun.
Yeah, it's good. It is. It's good to be back. A lot of gratitude always. So very thankful to have you in our lives. And please don't get distracted by my new shoes, by the way. I'm looking at the camera, and they are white, man. So
It adds contrast because right now we're the blue man group.
Yeah, a little
we all showed up. We all got navy and
a little depth here.
yeah.
So
Contrast is important.
Well, as usual, before we dive in, I do have my kind of stat of the day, and it's totally relates to what we're talking about today. So I was like, I wonder how many, like, what percentage of people think they're healthy? Like
Ooh, that's a good one.
when you just go, hey, do you think you're healthy? Sure, yeah, I feel pretty good. So this is interesting. 86%, and it's Americans. 86% of Americans say they feel healthy. Okay, pretty ambiguous. Only 23% of them meet the standard physical fitness guides. So that's interesting.
I was gonna say what's the percentage of Americans deemed obese?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Those statistics are a lot more telling, because the data would suggest that the perception does not match the reality in the United States, right? So we'll talk United States specific.
Yeah.
And I can't quote all the numbers specifically, but working with kids and youth, I think that a lot of the perception among themselves would be, yeah, I'm really healthy, I'm really fit, and then when we do some of these tests to get data and the various assessments.
Yeah, so let's find out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got those numbers with our local community, and it's shockingly low. It's shockingly low. That's with kids, right? And so that's with bodies that should have a capability to perform or optimize physical performance at a higher level.
Right.
Yeah.
So then if we're looking at the disconnect then as people get older thinking that they're healthy, it's just like most things, ignorance, and not from a negative term. They don't know.
Yeah, not stupidity.
I would agree
Right.
with that. Yeah.
Not laziness necessarily. That a lot of people think, this guy's lazy. Well, they don't know what to do. It's
don't.
intimidating.
Yeah.
Where do you start? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you get started? Like,
Are you ready? Because you got, I don't know if you have
I'm
stats
ready.
of the day or anything. or do
no,
we
my
wanna jump
stats
in?
are over.
Stat of the
day.
I really want to dive into this. I could give a lot of stats, but
Yeah.
I want your opinions on this. I mean, because you're closely this is what you
You're
do.
in the thick of it, man.
This is what you do.
It's not only what I do to some, okay, it is. All right, that's a career path. But it's also something that as we're getting older, we're seeing people around us and family members, either we've dealt with loss or people are, working through illness, disease. We've had our own. Your last guest, Chris, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great podcast. I recommend that one to everybody as well.
Yeah.
I too dealt with an autoimmune situation about 15 years ago and was so fortunate enough to have a naturopath here in South Orange County. Her husband at the time was actually the mayor of San Juan. Stephanie Nielsen, and she was an absolute lifesaver. And I don't mean that, I mean that with every intents and purposes. I was very sick. I remember a couple nights sitting there. We tested for various cancers. We were looking at brain tumors. And then, the way it was showing up for me was like AIDS. And I didn't have a past that would suggest any of that.
Right.
But it was a real period of time. So I remember sitting one night, it was quiet, and I was sitting there thinking, all right, I know at this point in my life where I'm going to have to be intentional in the path that we're choosing. I was ultra sick. I had to take a week off work because I couldn't get out of bed till 1, 2. It just took hours to generate the train engine, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then anxiety, depression, and so it was everything was starting to slide. I remember thinking, all right, either we get busy dying or we figure out a way to turn this around and make it a story and learn how to live differently and learn how to live, right? So embrace that power. And then for me, that's when I jumped deeper into the spiritual route, had to learn how to get physically healthy. And it was like that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And at that time, I was going through the traditional medical route and doing all kinds of tests, and we couldn't get answers, right? So then I'm hearing people say, well, it's psychosomatic, likely. And I knew that wasn't the case, because I'm meeting with psychiatrists. I had every test known to mankind done and couldn't get any answers. And somebody happened to tell us, hey, there's this naturopath in town you might want to check out. It's out of pocket. And so I went that direction and received so much information. And through applied kinesiology and doing various different tests of diet elimination and whatnot, we got answers, and then we were able to get, to a place where then, obviously I healed. So that's briefly the story, which matches Chris. That's why I bring that up, because a lot of us get on a path of learning and an unfoldment in this kind of this arena around health and wellness because of our own life experiences. So that's what got me going. And then now here we are 16 years or so post that. And, my time this morning that I spent felt like I unleashed a whole new world or paradigm to jump into. So it's exciting. And I think we have to not jump into it too deep, to answer your question, where do we start? For me, I started with breath, and which kind of goes back to our previous podcast where we talked about the value system, right? Your spiritual, your core, and then we looked at the emotional and the mental. So for me, that's where I had to start. We had to tap into the unseen to then produce the results in the seen, right? So we went within to fix the exterior and the outer world. And that's what we did with the podcast series here and with the 7 dimensions of wellness. So now as we jump into the physical part, like where do you start? It's kind of like, what messages is life giving you now? And we could start from just the physical, just looking at the physical being, and where a lot of us go to is what we see in the mirror, right? So what does my body look like? Am I happy with my weight? Am I happy with my appearance to others? Am I happy with my appearance to myself? I think that's where the majority of people start, usually. Or it's, what ailments do I have? What symptoms do I have of a bigger picture, right? I've got little fires burning or bigger fires burning. Where there's smoke, how do I address those?
Yeah. There's I have a tattoo on my arm. It's Begin Within, and I got it when I was 30. And it was well before I had any of the recent changes I've been through. And I just like I like the saying. I saw it at a concert or something on a sticker, and but I've always liked that. And whatever changes you want to make, whether they're physical, internal, emotional, it takes some soul searching. It takes looking within, and it's work. It's work. It's work just to do that, let alone muster up the energy to go, get the gym pass, start working out and doing the physical side. And I would argue that you need that looking inward is key. That's your starting point to really decide what it is that you want. Is it do you want the six pack, or do you want to be able to run a mile, or do you want appearances, or whatever it is that you feel from the physical side. I would argue that there needs to be some internal work done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and desire, right? So at what level do you desire this change? And we are creatures of habit, right? So, I mean, that's just how the brain's wired. That's how the body functions. We develop habits. We develop routines. And that's what we do oftentimes unconsciously throughout our day. When we're hungry, we go to this. Or I think one of the other things that we do that I think we could probably fix is we think about cost, right? So I'm hungry. What's the cheapest way I can go about fixing this craving or this hunger?
It's all connected.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's different where if we think about, okay, I'm hungry, what does the body really need and what's going to benefit this energy system? Because that's what this is. It's an energy system. So that's more short term. When we think of long term, and I think so the majority, let's say, of people watching this are our age or a little bit older, we should start looking at our habits and thinking about how do they impact me 5, 10, 15 years from now? What type of life do I want to have 5 years down the road, right? And some of us have different life expectancies that we're looking at, beyond genetic factors, just, based on where we are with our age. But I think that's a very sobering, real conversation to have. For me, this summer, we had a very active summer. I want to be able to wakeboard, right? We're jumping off rocks into water. We're swimming. I haven't been able to surf for months because I sustained some hip injuries. So for me, that makes me really think, okay, I need to start looking at flexibility, the way that my muscles respond to more physical environments. I not just want to be active. In order for me to experience my body to the fullest, it's going to be an active lifestyle, right? That's my mindset right now. So I have to prepare my body in such a way that I can do those things. And I need to take care of it also with reducing inflammation, with making sure that I'm doing my best with recovery. In fact, I'm in the middle of texting with the local company to get a cold plunge at the house.
Okay.
And we've talked about that in other podcasts.
Right.
So I bought a big trough and I fill it up with ice and do all that. But I think it's a lot of water that's being wasted, afterwards. So we can only water plants so much.
Right. I see you working though. I see you working.
Yeah. So for me, I realized I was with a group camping this summer, and we'd wake up and we went to a lower creek area and did cold plunges in the morning from the ice melt in the mountains.
Yeah.
And it was cold and it was uncomfortable, but the way I felt afterwards made me realize this has got to be a more routine part. And with all the research that I'm doing, cold plunge comes up often. And given my job and I'm coaching, my body is physically active. And in order for me to sustain my energy output, I have to do a lot with recovery and making sure that I'm fueling it the proper way as well.
I think you talk about eating your body. Okay, your body says it's hungry. I love this concept. It says it's hungry. We default to what we know as being convenient, maybe cost effective, or
comforting.
And comforting because it's what we know.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you get home, you need to get a snack. Do you go for the bag of baby carrots, or you go for the quick?
Is this some Gushers?
Or you go for the bag of potato chips or whatever. You know what I mean?
Unsalted mixed nuts.
And our body tastes the chips. It tastes what we know. So
Yeah.
if we're, it's rewiring, right? Changing your behaviors, changing and your viewpoint on I love that idea though. What this decision today, what's that going to impact me in 5, 10, 15 years?
Absolutely. Or near term. So if we focus on the physical body and what we're putting into it. So right now we're at a food intake level in our conversation, what we're talking about. And it can get very complicated. Well, do I go more plant-based because that's what's being advertised to me? Do I do more paleo or meat or, there's so many different
many
avenues.
options,
Yeah.
right.
Ways that we're being pulled. I try to default to nature as much as possible. And so when I look at, all right, what does the body need to function and what is this meat suit that I'm in, right? Because my philosophy is that I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. So in order for this, my internal self to experience life and get this meat suit optimized, in its experience, what do I need? Well, I'm composed of, that's where you get into quantum physics, right? So we're gonna take that out right now, even though a lot of this is empty space and water and whatever the case is. We're gonna look at, all right, this body needs minerals, it needs nutrients, and it's composed of the same things that exist in the universe. And let's take it down to the earth. So if I need these certain foods or things to create energy and also to help support my systems and to regulate my systems, it has to come from the earth. Right. So Gary Brecka, who I mentioned earlier in our conversation, and for people watching, Gary Brecka did a podcast with a gentleman, I forgot his name, but it's The Diary of a CEO, I think is the name of the podcast.
Okay.
Came out this past April, and Gary Brecka was an insurance agent, life insurance, and he used to look at people's data, health data, genetics, whatever the case was, and then they would create policies based on that information. And it's a fascinating conversation. It's probably my favorite conversation I've seen right now that exists out there because there's so much information. But he talks about, the way that the spinach leaf by itself contains things that we need, but it's what happens once it's ingested and it goes through this process and this methylation process, what it then becomes in our body. It's mind-blowing and it's fascinating, but that's where we get what we need is from things of the earth. For those people, that eat animals, and it's important that the animals are grass-fed because the animals get the nutrients from the earth, right? And then that's just filtration systems from that point.
Right.
So the micronutrients go from the ground to the animal. We ingest, the body does its work and then gets what it needs.
Right.
Or you go directly to the source, and plant-based. And some people can, break things down. I think the other important thing, and we had this conversation, Jimmy, and I see you, nod your head.
Yeah.
Everybody's different based on genetic factors and where your gut biome is, where your physical body is, right? So it's important to get information in order to make a more accurate pathway to reaching health optimization.
So invest in yourself.
Absolutely. There's no greater investment, boys.
Look within. look within. Go figure. You're fascinating.
What's going to buy you more time?
Everyone's amazing.
Invest in
Yeah.
You're all individual. There's no blanket statement out there.
Right.
Well, I think that's important.
For everybody.
Because we've all been exposed to processed foods. We've all gone through McDonald's or
And they're
whatever
delicious
at some
sometimes.
point. And
I mean, let's be honest.
They've been engineered to be, right? So
Totally.
through seed oils.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these people, some of the more brilliant minds in
Sugar.
sciences come from the food industry.
Right.
Right. And
No,
how
it's
to
very
manipulate
intentional.
signals. Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing is the less processing, the more direct from the earth, the better.
Correct.
Whether it's in your animal proteins or vegetables directly, you don't want less chemicals, you want less pesticides, all that stuff. So as close to the earth as you can with your food source.
Absolutely. It's close to nature. If you're unwrapping things, you're already a step away removed from the process.
So Twinkies,
no
go.
Yeah, but, and so for us in our house,
Squeeze-Its. We
Squeeze-Its,
talked about
yeah.
those. Remember
well,
those?
even bars, right? So I think in
Okay.
protein bars, there's a ton of protein bars, and then when you look at the ingredients, so there might be like an organic oat component to it.
Yeah.
And then it gets into like this brown syrup and this organic
Something you can't
tapioca.
pronounce.
This,
Well, sugar's called 30 different things.
right. Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So, and then what is the protein source? And so how much of it are you getting? All right, so this bar I'm eating might have 12 grams of protein. Okay, well, what's the protein source? Number one, is my body going to process it, and to what degree?
Yeah.
Pea protein might not be the best for me. Maybe I need
Totally.
a whey, but perhaps I don't have the digestive enzymes to process milk and whey. So it becomes a really challenging arena to navigate.
Yeah.
So like, where do we start? I think we have to get information. And where do we get that information? We're at a point in history where there are so many avenues for us that might cost a lot, right? Your insurance isn't probably going to cover some of these things.
Right.
Gary Brecka has a service. I think it's called 10x or 10 times, something like that. It's new to me, so I'm just getting into this. So he has a service where they'll take a swab of your mouth and then they can give you all kinds of biomarkers and look at genetic factors to help give you information. Dr. Peter Attia, who I'm reading his book right now called Outlive, and I became aware of him from one of the Hemsworth brothers. National Geographic and Disney Plus has a 6-series episode or 6-series a show that I found fascinating, looking at different facets towards optimizing life and the life experience. That's where I got to know Dr. Peter Attia. He's got a podcast. I subscribed to his service for a while. He's very technical in the way that he delivers information, so it's not for everybody, but his book, Outlive, is a great source, again, to look at how we change the direction we're going, and he calls it medicine 3.0. Like there was medicine 1.0 and then medicine 2.0 is what most of us have experienced. Medicine 3.0 is getting information early and then correcting the cause or steering away from certain dispositions.
So these services they'll take your swab, my swab, on an individual basis. The feedback is the feedback that you should focus on these types of foods or proteins or food sources versus others?
I think that's further down the line. It's to look at what is our body telling us now.
Okay.
First of all, what genetic factors exist, right? So if dementia runs in the family, certain type of cancers or whatever the case is, they can look at the genome and then they're able to say, hey, this parent was a carrier for this, or showing a genetic predisposition to this, or both of them, So it's going to show up as, something red. So that's a likely outcome. So what can we do then through diet, exercise, meditation, right? Controlling the internal aspects of self to help steer that away, know? And then they can get even more detailed information. For somebody that's more Italian, right? Eating breads and pastas and all that's been a part of what they've done. And you go to look at where there's centenarians in certain parts of Italy, their cholesterol levels are sky high, right? Let's say it's in the 600s or something like that. Where in the United States, if you go, a lot of times your doctor will look at your cholesterol markers and go, okay, you're over 200. We need to get you below the 200 mark.
Yeah.
Well, it's different, versus other centenarians that have been studied around the world.
Yep.
They have a history of smoking and drinking. But what do you say to that? It goes down to the genetic factor.
Like the blue zones?
Yeah.
The blue,
Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly
looking
right.
at the blue zones, right, for sure. So I think that you have to get that information because we are all different, and then how we look at that. So if your cholesterol is high, well, we need cholesterol through vitamin D. When we synthesize that,
your body creates it.
That's how we create vitamin D through sunlight, is through cholesterol. So if you're taking certain medications that are lowering your total cholesterol count, well, you need the HDLs. And it's not just that, it's the proteins within the cholesterol.
Yeah, what
right?
do your triglycerides look like? You got to unpack. You got to dive deeper.
For sure.
It's not just cholesterol.
Right.
It's what makes up what makes that up is important.
Yeah.
What I like about this idea and this concept is the education side of it. It reminds me of what we do for clients. We unpack where they're at with their financial life. They provide us with their pulling back the veil, if you will, and not everybody's different, and allows us to come in and make specific recommendations based off of where they have risks, right? Where they have needs.
So that's like a lot of people. The biggest one we get is, are annuities good? Right? We get that one all the time, and that's like a huge one.
It's just because
What do you think about
it's
annuities?
a buzzword. It's in the annuity, or are you a fiduciary? There's
Totally.
certain things that it seems like most clients or new opportunities
Yeah.
or prospects ask. But yeah, it's a similar process with going back to being educated. Now you at least know what you're working with, whether the outcome looks good or bad, or there's not a lot of hurdles in the way, or
Now you're in it. Now
or
you're involved.
we're about to run the gauntlet. At least we know,
Yeah.
and now we can now make more informed decisions.
Because the goal again is health optimization,
Right.
right, for this life experience.
I love it.
So that's what we tie it to, and that's what we're trying to do now. So if going to the gym is a part of your solution, well, why is that? What do you want to accomplish? Because let's say where I am right now in my life, going to the gym 4 times a week to focus on building muscular strength, it's not going to help me attain my goals. What I need to increase is muscle flexibility, and then what Tom Brady brought to our awareness is muscle pliability. The muscle's ability to
Guy's
endure
always stretching.
force. He's always stretching,
Always
but
stretching.
he does it with force applied. So, and we all don't have a guy. He's got that. I forgot the guy's name, but he's got his buddy that he brings everywhere with him.
His fitness caddy, basically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, his shadow. His
Yeah.
fitness caddy. That's a good. I like
Totally.
that. So at different stages in the game, our bodies are going to require different things. So muscle strength is important. All I need to do are 2 full body workouts twice a day. And this is for me based on my research and what I'm seeing a positive response to, right? But for flexibility. So for me, I am not naturally inclined in the flexibility department. So when I do yoga, I am not a high performer in yoga. I can't do a lot of those things. The ego takes a hit. So I have a hard time jumping back to yoga. And what I love is something I came across, and it had this cool picture like this samurai or whatever, but it's the change that you seek within your life is in those, like the dark spots. Like the magic occurs or is going to occur in those areas that you're not willing to go or not wanting to go, or the dark forest or whatever it is.
Because it's work, right?
It's the work.
Totally.
Well,
Yeah,
you know what they say. Ego is not your amigo.
Ego is not your ego.
You got to remember
I
that.
did not know that exists, and now that I exist, I'll make
gotta
sure
remember
I say
that.
it that way too.
I want you to think of a statement.
Right.
Momentum compounds rapidly. So I read this recently, and it reminded me of what we're talking about today. Momentum compounds rapidly. So when we're talking about physical wellness, and we right away said a couple buzzwords, overwhelming. It can overwhelm people to the point where they're frozen, right? They freeze and they don't do anything. They don't make any changes. And they're like, well, I missed 2 weeks at the gym and I'll start again next month. I'm probably too far out now. It's amazing all these excuses that we'll make for ourselves. And it's out of, like we always talk about, doing the work is harder. It's easier to not do the work. That's obvious. So why do so many of us continue to almost self-sabotage? And we know it's not even, we talked about ignorance, and being uneducated, but for the stuff that we do know, people are not dumb. You have access to so much information out there. People know more than ever now of what they need to do to some degree to increase their physical well-being, but they still don't do it. So like, I liken it to maybe a merry-go-round. Like when you're a kid and you're on a merry-go-round and one little pull, another pull, someone gets on. Well, what happens on that merry-go-round? At first you're like, dude, this thing's like barely going anywhere. Well, that momentum you gain momentum rapidly. All of a sudden that thing,
You're going to be sick.
Right. So what do you think about that idea of do one little thing? Don't set yourself up for absolute failure. We talked about a little bit about like the Whole30. Is the Whole30 bad? No, it was a huge craze for a minute, and it got a lot of people on the right track and exposed people to how to eat a little better, how to eat real food, how to cook. Some people are like, I've never cooked before. Now I have access to all these Instagram, show me all these recipes that I can. I think a lot of that stuff's really great. But like, I need to get the gym pass. I need to look like Jake. I need to look like Arnold, all these people. You talk about looking in the mirror, Instagram. We live in the world of likes and hearts, of wanting likes. You get 100 likes on your picture, it makes you feel better. If only 3 people like it, even if you're not that kind of a person, it kind of hurts you a little bit. So how about set yourself up for success, and maybe not, I need to cut out alcohol, this sugar. Well, maybe add some good things in. It can be a positive. Maybe make a good choice by adding something in and not removing everything. Give yourself some grace. And it's not easy to do. And Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So think of all the things that get you there. You're thinking about your health in 10 to 15 years from now on what you're doing. Well, how long did it take you to get to where you are? You think you can fix yourself? You're not broken, first of all. You can't change your lifestyle overnight. It's not a diet. It's not a fad.
Yeah.
It's making decisions. Give yourself some time and grace. That, and we talk about, like, I'm a very good coach more than a player sometimes. I'm guilty of all of that.
Sure.
I may go home and pour myself a drink tonight that I told myself I don't really do anymore. But why am I going to do that? I'm already deciding that I'm going to do that. It's balance, grace and balance, and give yourself a little slack.
Well, why do most New Year's resolutions fail?
Totally.
Because they set this expectation. They set the bar so
I'm
high.
going to lose 50 pounds.
They don't have realistic expectations, and they're going into something. They're skipping ahead. They're trying to skip it. They're not laying the foundation down and doing the work that, like, being educated or maybe doing some internal work. I would think if you get to a point to where you're doing some internal work and you're I think that's a way of loving yourself. Mm-hmm. I think it's a way to appreciate yourself and truly identify what it is that you want, because that's what would make you feel better, as opposed to what someone else looks like, or what your neighbor's doing, your best friend's doing, or the latest fad is. But without doing that foundational work, what if you go through and really look internally, and then your goals shift? It's not as important to look like so and so, or to be. I would think that would change.
Yeah,
you become more content with who you are. You're comfortable with your meat suit, right? The meat suit that you have, and maybe the adjustments that you want to make aren't even the same adjustments that you initially went into this process with.
Which is why we started this podcast series with
right.
core foundational beliefs, mental and emotional. One of the teachers that I'm really, I would say, attracted to, not in a physical sense,
sure.
somebody that when they speak, and I've been listening to this person for a lot of years, is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he was name dropped by Chris, who was on your podcast as well. And where I came in contact with Joe initially was through a movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? And that was my introduction into quantum physics. And Joe's story is interesting because he was injured in a severe accident, I think triathlon or biking, Palm Springs area, broke his neck and was paralyzed. Wow. And then what he had known about his work, he knew that he could rewire his brain and create certain emotional responses to change his current physical condition. So that's where it started. And, whatever, 25, 30 years down the road, he is very well respected and renowned. He's got a lot of books that help us change who we are, help give us direction to change who we are now, to making, to optimizing our life. I like to use that phrase. Mm-hmm. So that's somebody that I highly recommend as well. So if you're watching this via podcast, it means you have a YouTube capability. Type in Dr. Joe Dispenza, because what he does is he incorporates the mind-heart center. So that's coherence. I think we talked about that before, but that's important to have that alignment with your mental thoughts, producing emotion, which then creates the action, right? So it creates that physical change. So as we're talking about the physical dimension of wellness, your mind and your heart have to be aligned, right? Which create that internal feeling or emotion, which then sets energy into motion, which is the physical experience. So everything in my physical experience is a direct correlation or result of my core beliefs, my mental state, and my emotional state, right? So don't need to look any further. That's who I am, is what you see. Even my physical environment, right? And so at home, there's certain spots that I need them to be clean and organized or whatever, and maybe a spouse and the kids don't feel the same way, but
messes up your chi, man.
Well, it is. It's energy, right? Everything's
right.
energy and where things are and how energy flows,
Yeah.
And so that clutter sometimes for me, like my physical environment is important because when I try to really keep things minimized. I'm not on social media. I do go to YouTube because I can control that experience to some degree. I know if I swipe down, the algorithm, might be having some things,
Totally.
Throwing
or
you some
commercials
stuff.
pop up.
Your thumb of manipulation gives you a little
It does, right?
confidence.
So
Yeah.
YouTube controls my experience, and that's for me. Like I can obviously have access to so many wonderful people and conversations, and it's incredible. But Joe Dispenza,
Okay.
and the purpose of Joe, and I think for people watching, I encourage you spending some time with Joe and he comes from a science perspective, so he looks at reproducible results, and he'll speak what works for him. Some of the things that he's seen, but he looks at data, also. But he, I think, does a great job of explaining how the internal world impacts your external world, your physical body and your external experience. Because the Peter Attias of the world, the Gary Breckas, and Gary, I think, is a little bit more balanced, but some people that come from just data specifics, like I appreciate that information, but I also understand like the nature of the quantum realm and our reality, right? Our eyes are only seeing so much, which is actually very little, right? So if I know that, and we talked about water at the beginning of our last one, and I'll jump into this right now, because this was a big shift for me in those thoughts. Dr. Emoto from Japan did a series of studies, which now could be 20 years ago, but he took water and with intentionality, and he put like phrases, either affirming, like positive affirming phrases on the water, and then negative phrases on other water. And then he, with a microscope, looked at what that did to the water molecules over time. And those that were positive statements that had an intention of love behind them created these beautiful, almost like snowflakes, right? These symmetrical water molecules. And it was just, it represented that natural beauty. The water that had the you make me sick, or you're this or you're that, kind of these more negative thoughts, created a asymmetrical, kind of disfigured look in the water molecules. And so for me, when I saw that, knowing that our bodies are made up of a high percentage of water, we live on a planet where there's a high percentage of water. What is that telling us? And it's that water's kind of connected to the unseen as well, and it has memory. It knows where it's from. So in my body system, if I kind of go to thoughts and producing emotions that are a lot more, that are centered around love and positivity and higher in vibration, in that nature, what is that doing then to me at the water and cellular level of my body?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so that's where I think that Joe Dispenza adds the science now to that.
Right.
So if we take some of these things, Dr. Emoto by itself is a fascinating study learning about water. And I have a water DVD that was done by some Russian scientists that there's not a lot of intonation in it, and there's a very thick accent in English. But I spent some time, when I was in my healing process, learning about water and the impact that water has.
Yeah, I've seen a couple demonstrations with water and frequency, and I don't know if I've seen it around emotion specifically or with those phrases. But think about low self-esteem. Okay, you're talking about the physical, right? But you're looking in the mirror and you don't like what you see every day. Think about walking out the door and starting your day with that feeling or that emotion on a cellular level, and you do that for a 30-year career because you're working so hard and perhaps focusing on the wrong thing. What is that going to create internally? Does that create disease? Does that create Yes. I mean, I'm kind of
depression,
kind of rhetorical, right?
Anxiety,
but
sickness.
You carry that negative energy with you on a cellular level for so long, and it's crippling. It's something that's going to happen. So that's where I'm going back to this focus internally. Try to get content with yourself and love yourself, and then focus elsewhere, which is this whole process anyway. So I love this stuff.
No, that's a huge one. What do you think about the idea of doing something uncomfortable and how powerful one little thing that's uncomfortable for yourself and how powerful that is the benefit of doing something uncomfortable every day.
Well, so let's look at let's just look at the electrical piece of the brain and the body. We know that neurons that fire together wire together. And I love the 1% principle. And I've noticed it's been thrown a lot now with NFL teams and camps. Each day we're 1% better, 1%, that compounds. And then over time, you've created new routine and new habit. You've also created a new mental structure. And if you add that emotional component, that's the coherence. So whatever change it want to be, and I'll use an example. So for me, what I learned through Gary Brecka was his morning routine, which matches something that Andrew Huberman also does. And Andrew Huberman's a scientist, brain doctor, I don't know if it's brain specific, out of Stanford. And he's got a huge podcast following and talks a lot about optimizing human performance and health. And his routine is waking up in the morning, barefoot, goes outside to put his feet on grass and gets the early morning sunlight, for several minutes. Gary Brecka adds a breathing component to it. And then they have water with, and I just bought some of this. It's called Baja Gold sea salt.
I got the salt too. Baja Gold.
Okay, Baja Gold.
I got it.
Yeah, high mineralization.
Yeah.
And that was brought to my awareness recently because before I would do Himalayan sea salt with water. But Himalayan sea salt, Gary Brecka mentions this, could have a little bit more metals, heavy metals perhaps.
Yeah.
And the Baja Gold doesn't have that, and it has a greater range of mineralization. So that's why Baja Gold's recommended. But your body needs that, right? Because our water, we filter it, and we filter everything. We want to get the fluorides, the plastics, and all the bad stuff out of it, but we're also filtering out the good stuff, right? So it's just kind of this, it's water H2O in that sense. Give it a little bit of love and put a nice message on it, to activate it at that level. But then it also is a carrier for, again, bringing mineralization from the earth and nature to the body system.
Gotcha.
So we both were athletes at a pretty high level. And if you were anything like me, I wasn't interested at that time in doing the work. Mm-hmm. I was interested in girls and my Mustang, and I wasn't mature in that sense to where I could go train myself to be my best version athletically that school asked me to come play for them and perform, right?
Right.
So I needed coaching to whip me literally into shape and make me show up at 5 a.m. and go work and, put in all this time. I couldn't do that by myself. And I think that's the majority of people. Like, a lot of people are like, I can't do that. I'm not going to get up at 6 and go run or I may do it for a week, but and what do you think about the recommendation? Go get an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to do this by yourself, and you don't need to go pay someone, a trainer necessarily right out of the gate and commit to, a big expense.
Right.
Have a buddy, find someone to take a walk with. A little accountability goes a long way because, you don't want to let someone down, and you want to continue, you want something better for yourself. So if it's just starting, like, I don't do anything physical really. I work at home. Go out and get your sunlight and take a walk around the block twice a day.
Yeah.
Do you think you can do that? I'm not asking that much of you, and have your friend Johnny meet you at whatever time and go do it together.
Yeah.
There's a little social aspect of it too. And you don't have to do the 1,000 push-up challenge right away or squat 500 pounds, or those things may not be a part of your life.
Well, it's so much more available now. Thanks. Talking about COVID, a lot of people can get on Zooms or there's these video meetings, these virtual meetings that you can have now, and it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody that lives on your street or someone that's local. A lot of my healing came through Zoom meetings, and it was from people all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we had a common goal and common traumas, that we were working on, and we were connected that way. They don't necessarily, and you don't necessarily need to walk with someone around the block, but if you have that accountability of, every week I'm on this meeting, or every couple days I check in with my group, and you have that common ground. So there's plenty of
resources.
sources out there for you to find that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
and that
accountability.
is,
Yeah, it's
I
a good-
appreciate
good
you guys
tip.
bringing both that up, because I think that piece is extremely important as we look to optimizing this life experience. And that's kind of a plug to the next dimension of wellness. We'll talk about relational.
Yep.
I don't think right now is the appropriate time to
Sure.
dive into that. But to support what you're saying too, and looking at centenarians, a lot of them also belonged to community.
Community, right?
And either the family, they're with the family for a long period of time, or local community. But how important it is as a relational being to kind of help us through the life experience. But in looking at it from the physical point and creating some of these lifestyle changes, I think it is extremely important for a lot of people to have to have some sort of connection to somebody while they're doing it,
Yep.
and to make sure that they're of a like. I think that's like the blessing, and that helps the process a ton. Somebody that you match with, right? That's
Right.
a vibrational match. That's positive to be around. Because you might be walking around the neighborhood and they're talking about what they just watched on the news, and they saw this on Instagram or they saw this on Facebook, and then their grandma or their aunt or their grandchildren from such and such are doing this, and you just got fed all this negativity when you're trying to do something positive. You know, so hang
What
out
if you
with
have
people.
two people with two different political stances now? That's going to be a mess.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's, I think, something to be mindful of. And somebody that's looking at their own life, critically, is who do we surround ourselves with, and what are we listening to while we're doing this work?
Yeah.
For me, in my younger days, to go to music that was more aggressive in nature was definitely my draw. Where like this morning I had a podcast on, like I didn't need rhythmic thumping or guitars or somebody,
We play
telling
golf
me
to
something.
yacht rock.
Yeah. We do.
Yeah.
Guilty.
Yeah. But it just
Yeah.
changes, right? It's what we're surrounding in our environment and through our earpiece
Yeah.
at a vibrational level,
Right.
while we're trying to, up level ourselves, or just create a routine that's positive. We want it to benefit us at the emotional and mental level as much as possible. The more we take care of that inner self and that inner world, it's going to show up through that physical being and that external experience in life.
Wise words, buddy.
love it.
So next time, relational. Then
Relational will be the next one.
is that our last dimension?
No, we've got financial, which hopefully you guys got something to add for that.
Nothing. Yeah. No, we'll have to.
Yeah, and then we've got actionable as well. Or in the book that we put together, professional. I choose to go an actionable route
Right.
with that language. So maybe relational and actionable could be the next two, and then financial, could be a way to close
Yeah,
it out. But I think
like it.
I think that we're seeing now, as we've stepped out of that internal experience,
Right.
we're hopefully seeing through our conversations how important it is to take care of that internal world. Number one, really spend some time developing your core value self. If it's at the spiritual level, what does it mean to be a human being, and what do I want out of this experience to maximize this life experience? And then number two, embrace that emotional aspect of ourselves, and then learn how those things work and what can we do on a consistent basis to help create balance and emotional, not just stability. Like if when you get excited, you're up here, great, and if you're down low, but how can you kind of regulate that, right? We want it to, the natural world we appreciate, and balance helps sustain us in this life experience.
Right.
And it's the same with the mental aspect of ourselves.
Right.
Thinking, controlling our thoughts, our metacognition, and then, learning how to produce affirming, positive vibrational thoughts to align those emotions. Now we're into that. Physical.
Yeah, you said there's a few things there. The peaks and valleys, right? The great emotions and the poor emotions, or however you want to frame it. But I think as humans, we focus on the highs and the lows. That's what we associate as good and bad, and where we want to be, we don't want to be. And the reality is, we're only in those periods a short amount of our life. We're not always at the low point. We're not always at the high point.
Right.
And yet that's how we define us and maybe our impact or who we are.
Can I ask something on top of that?
Sure.
So by adding high or low or good or bad, right? We kind of add our bias based on our perception to that. Is it a possibility that that negative can also be a positive, right?
Well, that's how that's how that's how I've reframed it. As you talked about doing something uncomfortable,
Yeah.
or being in a place where you don't want to be, that is an opportunity for growth. That's an opportunity to that's my body now telling me, oh, something's there that I should work on. What is this?
Very empowering.
And
Yeah.
okay, let's sit with this. And sometimes I sit with it for weeks until I really understand, oh, that's what that is.
So you create then a narrative or an internal dialogue around that.
Yeah.
One of the things I appreciate through Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL, again podcaster, and it's got some books and some leadership things that I've looked at that have benefited me. He just uses the term good, and that's what he would say with the platoon or the group that he was working with. Like, hey, we're taking fire, or this happened, or this, or what might be bad or a stressor. It was always good. Okay, now let's look at it, and now let's take it. What information do we need to gather from this experience?
Right.
And then what's it telling us?
Yep.
Right. And then how do we proceed? What's our action plan now to help get to that state? And now it doesn't have to be that gnarly of experience. And I think we're drawn to sports. Sports creates a more dynamic experience. War, we look at these movies, but sometimes it's just actions through the course of our day. But then what do we need to do to internalize that to get us to a place of like balance, right? Or that place of equilibrium, because that's by nature what we want, right? The body's going to experience optimization when it's at equilibrium,
Right.
And that exists in nature,
Well,
right? When our systems are balanced and equal.
Totally. When's the last time someone was trying to was on the fence about maybe I should get a workout in today? And when's the last time you heard anyone go, oh man, I'm so bummed that I went out to the garage and did a little circuit. I feel terrible. It's never that. It's like, I'm so glad I did that, and it goes beyond getting the heart rate up and, pushing yourself. It's a mental win. Mm-hmm. Challenge yourself just a little bit.
Well, you're creating a new circuit upstairs, right?
That's
so
right.
Again, like I just
You
said
can
the
do
phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Right.
So as you start to then create something, and maybe like Joe Burrow last night, I was listening to a podcast with Joe Burrow, the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
And at the end, he cussed at himself, but he said, in camp a couple days ago, it was hot. He was tired, didn't want to do it. And he's, gave himself an expletive to his name, if you Joe or whatever the case was, let's go get after it, go get some. So it's that I think's, his way of doing it. For other people, I think to create something that is more long-term response when we're uncomfortable and don't want to do it, what is it that's pulling me from love rather than negativity? So for me, right now, I think of my kids and my experience with my kids. So if I don't want to work out or do something, it makes me emotional thinking about it. Do it, dude.
Yeah.
Get up and go.
Yeah.
Get in the sauna, get in the cold bath.
Yep.
Don't eat that thing. Is that pie worth it?
Right.
Or do you want to be there for their graduations? Do you want to watch them? Do you want to be a papa?
Yeah.
Do you want to be a granddad?
Yeah.
And let's end on right here. This is a good spot to kind of wrap up and to end what you're saying and add to it. And if you are going to partake, don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
Do it guilt-free. Enjoy it. That balance of, if you want to have some of that, have some of that. Maybe ask yourself, check yourself a little bit, but then enjoy it. Don't do it and then say, guilt yourself and shame yourself for it. Because I think we
Well, then you carry that.
tend to do that a lot.
You're right
too.
back in that same cycle of carrying that energy because you ate the Twinkie or
Exactly.
whatever it is, and
Yeah.
now it just feeds off itself, and all of a sudden,
Totally.
you're just carrying constant.
Motor that thing and go for a walk or something.
Yeah.
Well,
I could talk about this forever.
Oh,
I love
totally.
this stuff.
Well, how are we feeling physically? Are we
Feel
feeling
good.
good?
Yeah. I mean, the emotional state produced out of this conversation is one of love and high vibration, and mental state. So it's nice to get into the flow state. I think you guys mentioned that with Chris too.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I'll plug Chris right now, for people that can afford it and have the means to hire a coach, a life coach, I think that's extremely important because a lot of them are people that have gone through personal experiences, but they understand the person from a holistic perspective.
Right.
You know, and so that's where I think, like you talk, like, where do we go? You know, for me, not that I wouldn't benefit from a coach, but I get a lot from YouTube, you know, and I spend time in meditation and reflection. Where do I need to go? What's life telling me right now
Right.
to change some things, you know?
Right.
And for the physical part, sometimes it's just about being honest and looking in the mirror.
Yep.
Visceral fat's too high right now, buddy.
Yep.
You know, got to create some changes and adapt some routines,
Right.
you know, over the next, you know, few months, be intentional about it, and then that'll produce the result.
Well, let's say I would love to know, well, and we would never know, but I would love to know the money that you put towards a health coach or a life coach or trainer at the gym, whatever it is that piece that you need the most help with, or you feel like would bring you the most value or be impactful. Like, what's the trade-off 10 to 15 years down the road if you don't do that in healthcare costs?
Totally.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
shorter life expectancy, or, you know, so I don't know, you said your number one investment is yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and it goes around your concept of what your core philosophy is of money also. And that will be we'll save that table
I
after the
love that.
dimension,
I
you know, the
love that.
financial dimension of wellness, because, you know, for me, money's an energy exchange. So I don't always think in terms of what is that down the road, or what is that to me. It's what is it now? And if I want to change something energetically within my life, or I find value energetically within my life, that's the exchange, you know? So and it keeps things circulating,
love it.
you know?
Yeah.
Reframed it.
Well,
Yeah.
good conversation, man. Ruben, good to be back in the studio with you.
Yeah, it's nice.
This is fun. Jake, always a thought-provoking conversation.
I love it.
The next 3 months can't go fast enough.
Yeah,
to
relational.
We're about on a quarterly with you, and we're going to keep doing that. And when we run out of dimensions, we're going to move into something
We'll
else.
find an
There's
excuse to have you back on.
there's tons to talk about. So thanks for I know school's starting soon here, and
Giddy up.
you're prepping up. You're getting ready for that. And thanks for making a little time for us and joining our viewers today.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And to our viewers, if you're living your life and you have your health, you're the wealthiest person in the world. We'll see you next time.